Hey, what's up guys? It's Ninja here with Ninja's Epic Reviews. The past is very fascinating, isn't it? As time progresses, I find myself more interested in the stuff of the past rather than what's new most of the time. I don't know, there's just something about it. It has its own charm to it that you can't find anywhere else. It really represents its era. And when it comes to operating systems, few excite me more than Windows XP. Oh boy, Windows XP. I would hope that I don't need to explain what this is. But if you somehow aren't aware, it was the iteration of Windows that was released in 2001. But as far as info relevant to this video, it was an operating system that I have very fond memories of. Obviously, it's really dated in a lot of ways now, but it still has a lot of charm in my eyes. The menu icons, sound effects, the iconic background, Windows Movie Maker, and may I say, the install music is very early 2000s in the most perfect sense. So Microsoft used to have a software package you could buy where you could buy extra features and games to add to your operating system named Microsoft Plus. They were made from Windows 95 to XP and helped showcase some of the features of the OS and unlocked extra goodies. Windows Plus XP was released alongside Windows XP itself and added themes, screensavers, Windows Media Player skins, wow, Windows customization really went downhill, MP3 converter, CD label maker, and what is important for this video, games.
Wait, isn't that like day one DLC?
All the features added are pretty neat. For some reason there are a lot of plant-related additions here. I suppose it fits with the whole green theme they were going for. Alright, now that we've gone through that, it's time to go over the games on display here. Not related to Russian Foursquare, it's a puzzle game developed by Microsoft, and a pretty fun one in fact. Starting up the game, you see a square made out of different colored blocks, and the goal is to push the blocks around to create lines of a single color, so the line disappears. Once all the blocks disappear, you move on to the next level. If you take too long to create a line, the timer on the top right fills up, another line is added, and when the block is too big, the game is over. The easiest way to describe it is Bejeweled mixed with Tetris. There is a good amount of strategy present since you can only move individual rows at a time, so you need to use a lot of planning in order to guarantee your line is going to be filled by the end of the timer. For example, you can push a row just to isolate the block at the end of it, then move it around the square to fill a vacant spot. The game also adds metal squares that you can't move a few levels in, that change spots throughout the level in order to make it more challenging. They do have a tendency to troll you by being the last square you need to change causing the timer run out, which can be pretty irritating. Thankfully, if you clear the load that the metal square is on, it will disappear for the rest of the level, so it can be somewhat avoided. Sometimes when there's a few blocks left, there's no real way to clear a row and you simply have to wait until the game gives you another square of the same color that can be cleared. You can also add a row by hitting the spacebar, so at least the devs understood that there was a possibility. One thing I have to say is don't use the mouse to control this game. It is oversensitive and beyond finicky to control. You'll often make moves that you don't want to make and it just makes the game harder to manage than my self-esteem. Thankfully the arrow keys also work, and that's how I recommend controlling this. Although it isn't a perfect control scheme, so trying to move a block around the cube of squares is a lot slower. On another note, the game has two other themes you can choose from if you don't like the original one. The first one is bubble themed and it's pretty visually appealing, and a shaped themed one. You would think that the difference being shapes rather than colors would make it hard to differentiate between what's what, but honestly it worked pretty well. As cool as the new visuals are, the music in this game was pretty great as well. They're all pretty ambient, which really adds to the overall vibe the game is going for. There's even a different version of each song for when you're close to losing, which have different backing instrumentation. The appeal of this game really comes from the simplicity. The goal is obvious, which makes all the strategy come from how you go about killing the goal. It adds to the zen-like state that every great puzzle games have managed to create. Now this ain't no panel to palm, but I do appreciate what's on offer here. Overall, this game is a really great first impression so far. A nice puzzle game that is perfect for a few minutes of fun. But cool as it is, what I'm really interested in is the 3D games on display. So after all, Windows XP had support for DirectX 9, so let's see what it has to offer in the game HyperBowl. Yeah, I think we might have a problem here. Well, as it turns out, for whatever reason, whether or not it's the virtual machine on my laptop, these games don't work on the Windows XP virtual machine I used. But it can't be my laptop, so the games still work when I play them normally through Windows 10. Either way, let's keep focused. How is HyperBowl Plus Edition? Well, the first thing we have to address is that this isn't actually a full game of HyperBowl. What? It's actually a demo version of HyperBowl, meaning it only contains 2 to 6 lanes that are available. You'd have to purchase the other 4 separately in order to access them, which is a shame. Ignoring that, this is also a pretty interesting game. It actually started as an arcade game in the year 2000 before being ported, I presume as a way to advertise itself. To control, you have to repeatedly slide your mouse in the direction you want to move, like if you're emulating a trackball. You select what terrain you want by rolling into the one with the symbol of the respective area, or you could just wait for the timer to run out and the game will just choose what lane you're on. The gameplay in the lanes is pretty self-explanatory. You roll into the pins and try to knock them down. Do that for a few rounds and it's over. It is pretty easy to knock down a lot of the pins due to how much control you have of the ball. It isn't too hard to change directions quickly near the pins in order to get a better approach. The general gameplay is fun, but not anything particularly mind-blowing. What really makes this game interesting are the lanes themselves. Now we really only have one lane to choose from for something interesting, and that would be the roam lane. This one consists of a semi-bumpy lane with a bend in it. You have to go around in order to reach the pins. You can run into vases and stone blocks on the edge in order to move them slightly, but most of the challenge comes from trying to navigate around the bend while keeping the majority of your speed. Sometimes you can be launched into the air and off the stage if you aren't careful, so there is some strategy required. Either way, getting strikes and spares still isn't too much of an issue even with the added challenge presented. Moving on to the presentation, this game, despite being clearly dated visually, still looks quite good for a game released in 2001 for PCs. Obviously, not every aspect holds up perfectly. Some of the background assets are just 2D textures, but I do think this holds up for the most part. One part of this game I find quite odd is the music, or I suppose ambience is the right word. Despite the fact that the logo looks like this and its arcade-looted gameplay, the background audio, specifically the hub room audio, can be surprisingly unnerving at times. This game uses audio that would represent the area rather than traditional background music, which is fine in Rome since it fits the theme well for more nature-like ambience, but in Classic it just sounds really ominous for some reason. Now that's a soundtrack I'd really recommend listening to at 3 AM. In the end, HyperBowl is a neat 3D bowling game that is honestly pretty fun. It only having 2 lanes to mess around with just relegates this one to being a neat showcase rather than something you would actually want to put serious time into. Thankfully though, this game is actually available on Steam, believe it or not, so if you think you would enjoy what you saw, give it a go. Editor's note, the Steam version of HyperBowl seems to be a remake in Unity rather than just being a port of the original PC version, and based on what I read it doesn't seem to be nearly as good, so proceed with caution. Now those 2 games are neat extras to mess around with for a few minutes, maybe play once or twice every now and then, but they aren't anything you'd really sink your teeth into. This next game, however, is an exception to that rule, this game being the Labyrinth Plus edition. The game that I guarantee is the one that most people who even remember Windows Plus to any capacity would be familiar with. In fact, me rediscovering this game is what inspired me to create this video at all. So the question is, does this game hold up as well as I remember it? Yes! Being developed by Non-Stop Entertainment, which is a company I managed to find absolutely no information on at all, like literally zero information. Even checking the game's website on the Wayback Machine didn't help, since all that exists is a page with an Adobe Flash video player that unfortunately doesn't work anymore. The only thing I could really find is that one of the programmers still works on DirectX development to this day, which is pretty cool. But moving on to the actual game, before I get ahead of myself, let's start simple. What is the general concept of this game? We know those wooden labyrinth toys that people generally use to describe the gameplay of games like Super Monkey Ball and Marble Madness. Well, this game takes one of those and puts in 3D. This game goes with the most pure form of mobile game it can possibly be. The method of controlling is to move the mouse to move the ball, nothing else. Well, you can move the camera at different angles and distances, but the default angle that the game uses is perfectly fine, so there isn't any real reason to change it. This game's controls are really sensitive for whatever reason. I had to lower the mouse sensitivity really low in order for me to properly control it. Maybe it's because I'm using one of those newfangled laser mice and not a mechanical mouse. I would liken the controls to the Super Monkey Ball 1 Flash game, except there isn't a forced dead zone, so it feels more natural to control. One of the best aspects of mobile games to me is how easy they are to pick up and play, and this game is no exception to that rule. The goal is simple: guide the ball through the maze to reach the gold trophy which ends the level. The main obstacle you need to avoid is the holes that are scattered across the floors. You will quickly realize that this game is one of patience. The game is littered with holes that open and close, skinny gaps between holes, and a level design that really wants you to slow down and carefully move throughout the stage. You really cannot mess around either. If you do not keep enough focus on your actions, you will most likely end up falling off the stage. It adds a good amount of challenge and tension, which I honestly appreciated. The game can be really difficult at times, which surprised me, but it makes completing stages much more satisfying at times than it could have been. Thankfully, when you fall through a hole, the game will just spawn you next to where you fell right in the beginning of the stage, since some levels can be pretty lengthy and having to restart the whole stage would have just led to tedium that doesn't need to exist. Okay, it's a Labyrinth game. Clearly it has to get old, right? Doing the same thing over and over again on every level. Although that might seem like a possibility, this game does have some tricks up its sleeve that help keep things fresh, like Subway isn't. The game likes to encourage risk over reward with the gems spread out across the floors. Nice Spyro sound effect. When you first collect them and earn points, you might think it's useless to get them, but if you collect a certain amount of gems, you earn an extra life, giving purpose and an incentive to try to collect every gem, since you might not know when you need the extra life. This game does tend to troll you by putting them in hard to reach places, but honestly all it does is encourage you to get better at the game by rewarding skilled players. Another thing that rewards replayability is in the main arcade mode there is a time shown that if you beat it, the game will record your time alongside your account name. So if you're a DJ, if you're big into speedrunning the games you play, it's going to add a lot more time to the game than it would have been otherwise. In fact, getting a new best time even has its own noise when you beat the level. Another big way the game keeps fresh is there are a variety of different level themes and skins for the mobile that change as you go through the different modes. They all have unique music tracks and does help keep everything from feeling too samey as you progress. It also doubles as a way to add a lot of charm to the experience, going through wacky themes like cheese and a computer chip, which can make certain levels more memorable since you'll connect certain levels to the themes they occupy. Let's say you really like a certain theme and maybe just want to be randomized. Well, in the settings you can make it so only one theme shows up or make it completely random. I find this awesome since you can have every level take place in any theme, which is a detail that they really didn't have to add but really helps with replayability. You can even do the same with what mobile you control, and there is a wide variety of designs to choose from, even including some oddball ones like a soda can or a skull, which do look cool but aren't the most helpful when you're trying to get across skinny gaps. Apparently certain mobiles have different stats, at least according to the game's manual, which claims that the wiffle ball moves the slowest. But honestly I couldn't tell a difference when I played, so it might just be really subtle. These are all complemented with the game's graphics, which besides the backgrounds being pretty low res at times, look really great for 2001. The game supports up to 720p display settings, and even allows for reflections of the ball on the board, and I like me some game reflection tech. I am genuinely impressed by how solid this game looks for being almost 20 years old. Another thing I found to be pretty good is the music. It has an early 2000s charm that Russian Square had in its soundtrack, but this game is a lot more varied in its music. The best song in this game being for the Microsoft Plus theme. Seems a bit biased, but otherwise this is an amazing track. What isn't as amazing is the song looping, which unfortunately isn't that good. The songs just stop and start, which isn't helped by how short they are. It's a shame that this aspect in the game is flawed in the way it is. This game can keep it interesting with more than just a presentation though. There are power-ups that can be found occasionally on floors. These include a power-up that makes every hole close for a certain amount of time, one that turns the ball invisible and allows you to move through walls for a certain amount of time, speed up and slow down power-ups, and even teleporters. These lead to levels that add a whole new types of challenging obstacles to overcome in order to beat the level. Like this one level where you have to use a ghost power-up and the only safe area to be on is the path where a wall is. So you have to not only balance on the path itself, but you have to do it on a time limit before the power-up ends. Or another where the game gives you a hole coverage to immediately troll you with a slowdown, so you have to make sure you aren't over a hole before it runs out. Levels like these are honestly what takes this game from good to great in my eyes. It really shows the creativity that the devs had when they made this game. Another thing I really like about this game is the modes on offer here. There is an arcade mode, which is a set of levels that get progressively harder as you go along. But there's also a second mode called Race the Clock on offer. Unlike arcade mode, the timer counts down rather than counting up, and the levels have more straightforward designs rather than a more precise design of the arcade mode. Not that this game mode is void of skinny platforms, they're just less common. This also introduces an hourglass power-up to add more time to the timer. Although they aren't actually that common, they do have a few good levels tied to them. At the end of the day, all this really comes down to is more levels to play, which is fine by me. Speaking of adding new levels, when you close out a game, it advertises a free add-on pack that adds new levels and mobiles to choose from. Well, I actually have the add-on pack, and it shows up in the menu as My Labyrinth. These levels are organized alphabetically rather than by difficulty, so they differ a lot in difficulty, which can be really odd to get used to. For example, the first level, Back and Forth, is one of the hardest new levels, which seems like a mistake. The checkpoints where you get spawned back after falling are also broken in this level, which doesn't do it any favors. In fact, the level design quality is a lot less consistent in these levels as well. For example, there's a good amount of levels that have the ghost power up and the hole cover right next to each other, so the level can be beaten in a matter of seconds. The level is also very inconsistent in length. There are levels like Cold Shoulder that can be beaten in less than 30 seconds fairly easily, but then there's a level like Runaround which is so large that the corners can sink into the background when fully tilted. Even with some issues, there is some good in these extra levels. They have a high emphasis on power-ups, so some like the slowdown can be used to its full potential. I was genuinely surprised at how creative they got with some of these. For example, the level Shocked is a teleporter that will genuinely troll you, which I found amusing. Even if you don't care for the levels themselves, the add-on pack does add extra themes and mobile, so there's no reason to avoid it. Although I'm unsure what the space theme is since it isn't part of the add-on pack, and I'm not sure a second add-on pack exists. Overall, this mobile game really gives you a lot to work with for just being an add-on pack for Windows Plus. In fact, all these games honestly are fun to play, and it's a shame that only HyperBowl exists outside of Windows Plus. Revisiting these was a better experience than I was anticipating. I do recommend playing these if you can manage to get your hands on a copy of Windows Plus. These games are definitely of their era, but that doesn't mean they're not fun to play today. If I had to rank my experiences with them, I would put Labyrinth Plus at the top and HyperBowl at the bottom. There's nothing wrong with HyperBowl on its own, but it being a demo really detracts from the overall experience. Labyrinth Plus is really the star of the show anyway. The aliens are a cool distraction, but ultimately we don't have nearly as much to offer. In fact, the Labyrinth Plus specifically, I'd recommend to fans of mobile games. It was a blast to be playing it despite how difficult the game can get. But that's it for this video. Now if you don't excuse me, I have a video to go watch. Wow, I'm untalented. Hello, thank you for watching. The production for this video was a bit hectic considering school, but I'm glad to finally have gotten it out. If you want more content from me, I appeared in Greg Cube's video for Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz, and I also run a Monkey Ball podcast with a few other channels called E Podcasts. So if you're really looking for more Monkey Ball content, I'd recommend checking that out. Either way, that's it for me. See ya.